Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. I'm Anthony Skinner, producer of the show, and we are happy that you're here with us this week. We have a very special guest this week, Lysa Terkeurst. Lysa is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Uninvited and It's Not Supposed to Be This Way, as well as 21 other books. She is the president of Proverbs 31 Ministries, and millions of people use her app First Five and Encouragement for Today devotions daily. Lysa was recently awarded the Champions of Faith Author Award, and she has been published in multiple publications such as Fox News and CNN Online. Additionally, she has appeared on the Today Show as one of the leading voices in the Christian community, and each year, Lysa is a featured keynote presenter at more than 40 events across North America, including the Women of Joy conferences and the Catalyst Leadership Conference. Needless to say, you are in for a treat today. Hey, before I let you go, remember to follow Ian on socials. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Ian Morgan Cron. And you can also follow us at Typology Podcast. That's at TYPOLOGY Podcast. And lastly, if you love the show, if the show means a lot to you, we ask you to go over to iTunes and leave us a review. Hit 5 stars and leave us a review. It really helps other people to find the show so they can hear all these great interviews with our great guests as well. Hey, that's it for me, Anthony Skinner. Nothing left to say. And now, here is the host of our show, Ian Cron.
Lysa Terkeurst, welcome to Typology.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of this podcast, and so it's such a joy and an honor to be with you.
Well, we're a big fan of yours, and I'm a big fan of Enneagram Nines.
Well, thank you. You know, it took me a while to figure out that I was a 9, but I think that's kind of typical for a 9. And do you know the very first time I took an Enneagram test, I scored evenly across all numbers, and I was so afraid that was like that revealed some sort of deep psychosis that I had going on. But yeah. So yeah, I'm a 9, but I have a very strong wing 8, and my wing 8 gets me in trouble.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who has a daughter who's a 9 wing 8, and her daughter likes to say, "My 8 wing just did something that's going to take my 9 weeks to repair."
I knew you were going to say that quote because I've heard you say that quote on the podcast before, and I've actually used that line several times. Like, I'm so sorry, my 8 is about to do something. It's going to take my 9 a long time to clean up here. So I got it from you.
Well, I'm glad it's been of use. For sure. So 9s are pleasant, and I know this, by the way, because I'm married to a 9. I have a daughter who's a 9. My life is beautifully furnished with 9s, which is fantastic. Really, really fantastic. Pleasant, laid back, accommodating. 9s are motivated by a need to keep the peace, to maintain a sense of inner tranquility, to merge with another individual or a group, and to avoid conflict at all costs. Now, does that sound like you?
Well, here's the thing. I don't avoid conflict at all costs. I do want peace at all times, though. So I don't want conflict to arise. So I find myself navigating my conversations, my relationships to prevent conflict. But because I spend so much time navigating and preventing the conflict from arising, if it ever does arise, I feel like I'm very well prepared to state my case. And at the same time, here's the issue that I have in conflict, which I don't know if it's an issue or maybe a benefit, but as a 9, I can feel what the other person's feeling. I can even agree with their side, even if personally I disagree with their side. So for a long time, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought, why is it that I am so deeply empathetic with other people that even when I have a conflict with them, I can see exactly where they're coming from, even if I don't agree with it.
That is you're right. It could be a blessing or a curse, right? The blessing is that the other person feels heard and understood. And that is so important when you're having difficult conversations, right? Maybe we should call it that. Rather than conflict, sometimes it's just, how do we navigate difficult conversations?
Yeah.
And so much of it, in my experience, is how do we let another person know that we hear them and understand them, but we have another opinion, another thought, another idea. I recently came across a really great formula for nines, for everybody, but I think maybe helpful as a schema for nines, which is you begin by saying, I feel, here's this little conflict thing, right? I feel because, and then the reason, and then something that you can do that's only in your control, and something you hope the other person will do that really you're powerless over, but they have control over it. So, for example, if you and I were having a fight, Lysa,
right.
I could say, Lysa, I feel sad when you blank because I think here's the second half, because I think it undermines our friendship. I will try to be a person who is receptive to your point of view, and I hope that you will do blank, blank, blank. So it's a 4-part thing, right? I feel because, the case blank.
Right.
I can do this. I hope you can do that.
That's
and it's
excellent.
Just that everyone, isn't that a nice little schema?
Yeah, that's really good.
I think I picked that up from a wonderful counselor I know, and it's been so helpful. So, what led you to conclude that you're a 9? Like, what was the big moment you went, boom, I'm a 9?
Okay, well, let me start with why I was resistant to being a 9, because I don't think that my chief sin is slothfulness, and because I'm a very active person. However, I have 2 speeds, 100 and 0. So when I hit a 0, my whole family would agree. When I turn off, I will not turn back on. The whole concept of a second wind, foreign to me my entire life.
I have never had a second wind.
I don't even know what that is. I've heard people say that forever. When you get your second wind about 11 o'clock at night? Nope, never.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, I remember when my kids were little, they're grown now, but I remember telling them, this is very bad theology, but it's very good an understanding you need to have of your mother, that at about 9 p.m. every night, the Holy Spirit leaves my body. So I cannot be held accountable for what comes out of my mouth after 9 p.m.
That's hilarious.
Well, it's interesting. Now, a 9 with an 8 wing would have more stamina than a 9 with a 1 wing.
And I do. And so I think that's where my 100 miles an hour get. Like, I can go and go. I'm very, very driven. I really am. But here's another thing. I finally better understood where another little place that slothfulness comes out. And that is, I get a secret thrill from avoiding the main thing that needs to be done. I do. It's like, if there's a big thing that needs to be done, it's secretly thrilling to me to avoid that and to get other things done. I know, it's terrible.
I think there's a funny but really true paradox in that, right? Which is that in some strange way, we get energy from what we're avoiding, right? Which seems to be a little bit of chasing our own tail, right? But we all have these strategies that ultimately don't work for us, but seem to in the moment, right?
Exactly. So for a while, I thought I was a 3 because I'm a very high achieving person, but I am too much of a peacemaker to be a 3. I am so committed to the truth. So, and if I feel like there's any deceit at all, self-deceit or manipulation, I'm so sensitive in my spirit. So then I figure, so I kind of like, okay, I don't think that I'm a three. Then I went to a one and I thought maybe I'm a one wing nine. But I really can't be a one either because ones have such a hyper inner critic, and I really don't have
Hmm.
that. I like to be at peace inside of myself and outside of myself. So here's the big tip that kind of led me to nine wing eight. My whole life growing up, even when I was early married and having young children, and now even at my ministry, one of the main roles I play is a role of referee. I am called on to be the referee everywhere I go and have my entire life. So finally, when I kind of put all those pieces together, nine wing eight is where I landed. But I'm talking to the expert today. So if I've had some sort of Enneagram mistype, I'd love for you to say that I have
No,
mistyped.
as you may know, I avoid that. Like, it's like,
I know I wanted to see if I could trick you though.
no, it's very rare that I'll stop. I think we've only had it twice where in the middle of an interview I've gone, gee, I wonder, let me ask you some questions, Um, but, I think it sounds like you've done your work. And this is one of the things I love about the Enneagram, right? And rather than well, it's a journey. Sometimes it took me 10 months to figure out my type. And people look at you like, well, that's not very efficient. I mean, like, why don't you just give me a test and give me a sure-clad answer or something like that? I'm like, no, it's like in order to arrive at that conclusion, you had to learn about a lot of other people. You had to learn about other ways of like, oh, maybe I'm this. And you had to research it and think about it and ponder it, pray through it, whatever, before you arrived at where you were. And to me, that's like the part of the joy of the whole journey.
It was thrilling to me, to be honest. And I enjoyed the process of elimination as I spent time with other people and learned more personally about the other numbers. I was very quick to identify. I have a daughter that's a four, and I'm not a four. I was very quick to identify that. I discovered I couldn't possibly be a one when I became utterly convinced my oldest daughter was correct in her assessment that she's a one.
Hmm.
My husband's a three, and another good close friend of mine is a three. I very much eliminated a three after really getting to know some of their nuances and motivations and fears and how they process things. And then I have lots of eights in my life. And so for a while I wondered, I have a lot of the strength and I can be direct. It takes me a bit to be direct, but I can get there. But I'm not motivated like the eights in my life. And so I see a lot of eight in me, but it was a beautiful journey. And finally, when I landed and admitted I'm a nine, wing eight, I lived with it for just a little bit, and I'm happy with it now, most days.
I'm well. I mean, nines are just remarkable human beings, and I love that you were able to say, when I owned my nineness, and I found just a sense of settledness in it. I just hope everybody does that.
Me too.
Because initially everybody's resistant to their type. In some ways, whatever type you're most resistant to might be your type. You know what I mean? It's almost a clue, like, oh, whichever one maybe feels a little, oh, that might be it. But I do always hope that very shortly after, people kind of move through the discomfort of exposure and, looking at the downside of it and grimacing a little bit, that they kind of get to the place where they're like, no, I kind of love this. This is my thing, and I love being in the world in this way, So how has knowing the Enneagram, and how long has this been for you now?
This has probably been from the first time I heard of the Enneagram, which I feel like I was a little slow to find. I feel like everyone in the world knew about it before me, but I feel like I think the first time I heard about it was probably maybe 2 years ago, and And I told you, the first time I took the test, I scored equally across the board. Like I was every number. That's kind of typical for a 9 though, too, I guess.
It is.
And then, so it started on a journey. I was slow to read the books. But then when I finally jumped on board and I read your book, The Road Back to You, I loved it. And I started to have conversations with people. And I feel like a lot of people are talking about the Enneagram right now. And so it just became something that it sneaks into almost all the conversations I have now when we're talking with staff and when I'm talking with my family. It's helped me make sense of some really important things I needed to make sense of. I don't know if you know that much about my story personally, but my husband and I went through a 3-year separation. And a lot of devastation that happened in our marriage. And one of our counselors was Dr. Michael Cusick. Well, I say doctor. I think his name is actually Michael Cusick, but I think of him as a doctor. So we'll just go with that. So he was our personal marriage counselor, doing a lot of intensive work with us. And it really has helped me better understand the unique wiring of not only when you're in your best moments, but when you're in your worst moments. And it's also helped me understand how important it is not to use your Enneagram as a weapon against other people or as an excuse for continued patterns of behavior that don't need to continue.
Mm-hmm. Now, Lysa, I have a question, an important question I want to ask you. But first, I need to give a shout out to our 2 new sponsors. Folks, I love to read and I love to keep up with current events. But I'm a busy guy like you. I don't always have time to sit down and open a book or read a newspaper. And that's why I use Audible. What is so great about Audible is that I can listen anytime. So when I'm walking through an airport, driving in my car, taking my morning stroll around the neighborhood with my dog, or getting a workout in, I simply open the Audible app and I start listening. I'm telling you this, I'm a firm believer that listening makes us smarter, more connected people. Audible delivers best-selling books, business, self-improvement books, memoirs, and more, all professionally narrated by actors, authors, and motivational superstars, and with free access to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post. I am always up to date on current events. So I encourage our audience to start listening today with a 30-day Audible trial. And when you do, your first audiobook plus 2 Audible originals are free. Visit www.audible.com/typology or text typology to 500-500. Again, that's www.audible.com/typology or text typology to 500-500. And speaking of traveling and always being on the go, it is really important for me to stay healthy and keep my energy up. So I started recently taking some new vitamins and supplements through Care Of. Care Of is a subscription-based service that delivers vitamins and supplements customized for your specific health needs. And it's really cool. All I had to do to get started was simply visit www.takecareof.com. I went there, I did a short quiz, I answered a few questions, and then after I was done, they shipped customized packets to my door. For me, sometimes it's hard to know what vitamins or supplements I should be taking, but Care Of makes it easy to find out what you specifically need to be your healthiest. And with protein powders available in individual packets for on the go, and the vitamin packs all personalized to my fitness goals and dietary preferences, I can drop what I need into my suitcase or just here at home and get going. And just for our Typology listeners, you'll get 25% off your first Care Of order. Just go to takecareof.com and enter Typology. Again, for 25% off your first Care Of order, just go to takecareof.com and enter typology. All right, let's get back to our guest, Lysa. Okay, so you said something just a few minutes ago that I thought, I'm going to sort of send a little flag up for me as an interesting question. Why is it that so many people are interested in the Enneagram? What is this sudden interest that people have? Because I ask myself that question all the time. I'm like, I wonder what it is that has sort of set off this really flooding interest in the Enneagram.
Well, I think people talk about their felt needs a lot. They may not know they're talking about their felt needs, but they do. And as an author, I'm always paying attention to this. So a felt need is either a question that they're asking or a problem that they're having. And they're looking for answers and solutions constantly. So as I pay attention to people's conversations, both in-person conversations, I have a staff of 65 people. I have a very large family. I have lots of conversations around me, but also conversations on the internet. I've discovered people talking about their problems and questions often lends them to talk about their wiring. And we enjoy figuring out our wiring so we can better understand the conversations that we're having and the problems and questions that we're trying to solve and get answers for. So I think that people like to talk about themselves. They like to find solutions for themselves. And I think it's almost like we crave a system of understanding that which is not really easily understood. And that is human to human contact and human processing. And we don't really have a system for understanding the way people are wired apart from things like the Enneagram that can neatly put people in categories and explain some of their behavior so that as we're relating to one another, there are natural connection points and explainable differences.
So in that season of difficulty between you and your husband, I mean, and in the time frame since, has the Enneagram featured as an instrument of healing and of understanding and transformation? Are you using it in your relationship with each other?
We use it every day.
Really? Tell me about that.
We use it every day. Well, part of our story is not the reason why we were separated for 3 years and the source of the marriage trauma, which I talk about freely. And my husband has given me permission to do so. And I've written a book about it called It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. Not so much about what we've been through, but how to process those deeply devastating times in your life. But my husband's an Enneagram 3 and with a wing 2. So one thing I've poked at is what really happened to unravel our relationship, because it's important to me that I understand how to not continue some of those behaviors as we're repairing our relationship. Because on the outset, we were doing, Ian, all the things that you would think would prevent an unraveling of a relationship. We were committed to our family, both of us. We were going to church. We would go to marriage conferences. We were reading books. We were intentional about date nights. So there's this checklist that we think if we do all of these things, that will equal a great relationship. And on the outside, it did. The problem was that internal wiring that he had and the internal wiring that I had, it started to pull apart some of the behind the scenes intimacy that you need for a marriage. Now, let me give you a practical example because my husband and I have talked a lot about this. 3s can be performers. They can be great at doing all of the right things and performing really well while internally having a battle that they have a hard time communicating. Also with his wing 2, he loved being a helper. But as I grew in my ministry and had the ability to hire assistants, I asked for his help more and more because I didn't want to inconvenience him. That's where my peacemaker comes in. A peacemaker never wants to feel like we're inconveniencing someone. And
right.
and when I'm unhealthy as a 9, I will go to a 6. And I can convince myself the sky is falling so quickly, it is not even funny.
Yes.
And so to navigate some of those fears of I don't want to inconvenience him, and I I am worst case scenario when it comes to drama, he overcompensated with more performing so that I would never feel like the sky is falling.
Mm.
When inside, he really did have concerns that he wanted to talk to me about. But he knows I like peace and I need peace. So he was performing to keep the peace. I stopped asking him for help. The internal intimacy started to pull apart. And of course, it's more complicated than that. But as we've unpacked this, using some of the nuances of our Enneagram numbers has been tremendously helpful to help us understand behind the scenes really what was going on inside the very essence of our wiring.
That first of all, thank you for sharing your story and being so eloquent about how the Enneagram has been a useful tool, in the middle of it all. And again, this is something I'm so grateful for is we need a vernacular. Like we need a language when we start to talk about our interior landscape. And none of us have it. I mean, none of our parents don't. We're a mystery to ourselves. We don't know how do I explain what I'm feeling and thinking and why? But suddenly the Enneagram comes in. It gives us a low resolution picture of our interior world. It's not perfect, but it's a starting place. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's just a good starting place.
It is a good starting place. And so I'll give you one more example. And this is kind of a funny example, but I've learned with a 9, I don't even want to call conflict. I call it growth opportunities. Like
we're going to have a growth opportunity conversation right now.
That's exactly. And so I've had to learn it is okay to have conflict. It is okay. So like, for example, forever when I was raising my kids, I would say things like, my kids would say, I'm so mad about this, or I'm so sad about this. And I would instantly jump in and go, you're not mad. You're not sad, because look at all these wonderful things that we can think about right now. And so, of course, I knew this day would come one day when my kids would all go to therapy and then come back to me.
Right.
That's why I kept scrapbooks, so that I would have proof of all the good things I did as a mom. So when, but a couple of my kids went to on-site, and that was fantastic too. But one of the things they learned is that it is good to say, I am sad, I am mad. But when you have a peacemaker mom, which I am, I was all the time trying to navigate and rename things. Like, we're not sad, we just need to go play. Or we're not mad, we just need to be kind to one another. And we don't have fights, we have growth opportunities. And you see, all that looks so good on the outside. And it is my way of avoiding, if you will, conflict. But it's also, it can be detrimental within relationships, because the reality is people were mad, people were sad, people had hard things they needed to talk about.
Well, one of the things I just appreciate is you're, owning, what was my piece in that, unhealthy dance in the family, and we all have unhealthy dances in the family, right? And one of the things I share with parents a lot, is I tell them, don't be afraid. It's never too late to tell your kids you're sorry. You know what I mean? And to ask their forgiveness. There is something so powerful, especially in their adolescent years, but forever, just telling your kids, hey, you know what? I just didn't do that well. We were in what, and when you explain to a kid too, hey, guess what? I was growing up at the same time.
Right.
I was growing up too.
That's right.
And, and so forgive me for the things I did and the things I failed to do. And, and then you see, kids just, I've seen it repeatedly, just kids melt. All they just needed was for the parent to acknowledge their humanness.
That's right. And I think it's good too, to be able to identify where you're dancing around your own dysfunction and say, we've danced around this dysfunction long enough. For example, we had some remodeling done at our house, and somehow the lights in our backyard got attached to the hot water heater. So if the lights were on, the hot water heater worked. If the lights got turned off, which obviously they do every single night, the hot water heater goes off. So I kept trying. It took me forever to identify, oh my goodness, somehow the wires have gotten so crossed in our remodeling process that the hot water heater is attached to the lights in the backyard. So, but instead of me calling the electrician and saying, hey, wires got crossed here, I started telling everyone that came to the house, hey, just if you need to take a hot shower, make sure the lights are turned on in the backyard. Do you see how dysfunctional that is? Like, that's such an example of dancing around a dysfunction that's there. And that's a funny example because we're talking about a hot water heater and lights. But often in families, it is good to take a step back and saying, what is something incredibly dysfunctional that we've danced around way too long that we really need to bring up at this moment in our family and acknowledge it's time to make some progress here. It's time for some healing here. And so just like you said, it's never too late to apologize to your kids. I think it's also never too late to acknowledge areas of dysfunction and address it with the whole family as a whole.
For some reason, well, first, I mean, I think that's incredible wisdom. But as you were talking, and you'll appreciate this as an 8-wing, I have a daughter who is an 8 on the Enneagram, who you would love. I mean, she is just a tornado with legs. And she one time she said to my wife's a 9, and she grabbed the phone out of my wife's hand one time because my wife was just kindly not hanging up on a salesperson on the phone. And my daughter took the phone out of her hand and said, "Never call us again." And she hung it up. And she looked at my wife and she goes, "It's never too late to yell at somebody." Well, anyway,
I think my daughter, who's a 1, would do that same thing to me because she just says, "Mom, you don't have to be so kind to every single person." And I said, "What are you talking about? Of course you have to be kind to every single person, you know." And she said, "Mom," and I said, "Why are you being discouraging?" She said, "I'm not. I'm being realistic."
Wow. Well, our kids are our best tutors,
Yes, they are.
Now, Lysa, I've got a great question for you when we come back. But first, let me tell you all about Restoring the Soul. Everybody, I want to talk to you about my friend Michael Cusick at restoringthesoul.com. Michael's a counselor in Denver, Colorado. He runs Restoring the Soul for the past 20 years. People have been going to this remarkable program where you can spend 1 week to 2 week blocks in intensive counseling with Mike, half-day blocks, let's say. This is where you get to do super deep work because oftentimes people can't get enough work done on a weekly 50-minute session, right? They really need an immersion. It's almost like rehab, right? You can't go to one meeting a week. Sometimes you got to start by having an intensive, and this is an intensive. And I cannot commend his work to people enough. He's particularly good around sexual addictions, people with sexual addictions. You need to go to restoringthesoul.com, check out Michael's work. You can even call him at 303-932-9777 and just get a free consultation. And as a special bonus for typology listeners, they can go to www.restoringthesoul.com/typology. And what you'll find is a PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma is Affecting Your Relationships. And that's a freebie for our typology listeners. So everyone be sure to check that out. And one of the most common questions I hear about the Enneagram is, how do I use it? Because here's the deal. Knowing what to do once you know your type, well, frankly, it's kind of a mystery to most people. So that's why I've partnered with Integrative Enneagram Solutions to offer you the IEQ9 assessment. In less than 45 minutes, this assessment can give you all the information you need to understand the Enneagram and how to use it in your daily life. Not only does it give you the most accurate results available regarding your core number, but it also includes the most comprehensive information about your specific type, all in one place. The IEQ-9 report includes your typical patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting, your blind spots, your strengths and positive qualities, a complete picture of your current level of stress, how to work effectively with other Enneagram types, and development exercises you can immediately put into practice in real-world scenarios. So, if you want to know why you do what you do and who you were uniquely created to be, the IEQ-9 will save you time, and it'll get you started on a path to greater self-knowledge. It's available now at ianmorgancron.com/assessment. All right, let's get back to our guest. You do a lot, and I know that your writing and your work is helpful to all people, but you obviously have a great deal of women in your universe that you speak to. And I'm just curious, and I've never asked this question of somebody, but what message would you give to women nines? Like, what wisdom would you want to impart to women nines specifically?
Well, first of all, I would say the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. So I think that is true. I think that there is a lot of really good stuff that we bring to the world in being peacemakers. And I think it's wonderful. A caution I would give to the nine is, according to the Bible, we are given the command to love, but we must not confuse the command to love with the disease to please. I think that's really important, because I think as a nine, it's very easy to feel like you need to please everyone. And it's also very easy to believe that you can only be your best self when you're being like the person that you're with. And the reality is, you don't need to be like the person you're with. Part of the delight of being you is that you bring different qualities, and it's okay. It's actually good. It's colorful and delightful and energy bringing and expressive when you decide who you are and bring that to the table, rather than always feeling like if I'm with a certain type of person, I need to be more like them to make them feel comfortable. That's not really true. So I would say to other women who are nines, it is delightful to be a nine, but it's also powerful to be a nine. And so don't think that just because your natural tendency is for peace, that there's not power in that. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Boom, mic drop.
So good.
We got to end on that. That's the boom mic drop moment right there. Lysa, tell folks what you're up to. I mean, you're a #1 New York Times bestseller, the book Uninvited, your book It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. How do people find out about what you're doing? What are you excited about next?
Okay, so it's easy to connect with me. My favorite place to connect with people is through Instagram, and my Instagram handle is @Lysa Terkeurst. You can also connect with me through Facebook. And then Proverbs 31 Ministries, the website, www.proverbs31.org. All good places to connect with the work that I'm doing, and if I'm hanging out in the World Wide Web, Instagram's typically where I hang out. But what am I doing next? Well, I am working on a new book project that I think will be a good follow-up to It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. It's not supposed to be this way. If you were to nail that message down in one word, it's disappointment. Where does disappointment come from? What do we do about it? Especially when disappointments grow to life-altering devastations that have left you completely shattered. So I do tell my story about what my family has been through and the devastations that we've walked through, but it's not an expose on me and my marriage and my husband being unfaithful. It's not that. That provides a gentle story as the backbone of the book, and it explains some of the emotion that I bring to the book. But next, I'm writing a book on forgiveness and moving on, which I think is another big topic that I want to explore for myself, and an area that I need to grow in. I always tell people, especially my editors, I always say, don't look at me as a New York Times bestselling author, even though I am. Look at me as a first-time author of a new message, because I'm that also. Every new message, I'm a first-time author all over again, right? And so I write about what I struggle with, and I write about areas where I need to grow in. And I know I'm going to do 2 years of research with this book. So I want it to be research that's going to benefit me personally, as well as benefit the audience that will eventually read this message. So forgiveness is a big thing. And how do we move on in healthy ways? That's a big thing. So that's what I'm working on now.
Well, I can't wait to read it, and I can't wait to have you back on so we can talk about forgiveness for Enneagram Nines, which actually is its own sort of a thing. I mean, it's something that bears our exploring together. Well, I mean, thank you for being on, for being a nine, for bringing peace into the world wherever you go, and for the incredible ability that you all have to reconcile the irreconcilable oftentimes, not just with people, but with ideas, with points of view. I mean, it's an amazing charisma. It's a gift that you bring to the table of life that we all get to enjoy. So peace and grace to you and all the things that you're doing. And I hope you come when you're in Nashville in the Franklin area, that you'll be sure to come by the studio and hang out with us.
That sounds great. I would love that. That would be such a joy. And thank you for what you do. You are helping all of us understand our wiring, our connectivity to each other, and how to be the best version of us we can be. So you've given the world quite a gift, and I really appreciate you.
Thanks a lot. And everybody out there listening to our podcast today, from Anthony Skinner,
yes,
my sidekick.
Hey, fantastic show, and great to be with you today, Ian.
And from me, all our love, and remember the words of the great Oscar Wilde: be yourselves, everybody else is already taken. See ya.